a forest at night. So all the trees were like blue. It was all shades of blue and stuff. And I remember my classmates being like, trees are not blue, they're green. You know, like all this like criticism, right? About I didn't do it right. And the teacher was like, why did you paint it blue, you know? And then I'm like, because, you know, at night things change, the color changes, the perception changes, and this is how I felt, like, this is my representation of it. And she was like, I love it, like, this is great. I remember she really loved that painting, and she called in my parents one day. I also was not the best student. Not that I would get bad grades, but I had a tough time in school. But she called in my parents and she was like, she asked my parents if she could have the painting. I remember my mom asking, well, why don't you ask him? And then so she asked me, and I was like, yeah, you could have it. And that was like my first real thing of like, there's something here that I need to explore further. Eat a little something or drink a like coffee or something. I was born in Lima, Peru, 1981. I was raised in La Molina Vieja. I have an older brother by 2 years. Both of my parents were talented. My dad was a chemical engineer, and my mom, she worked at an architecture firm. She was around that stuff all the time. I loved comic books. That was fucking awesome. Drawing cartoons and like Mickey Mouse. But there was something about copying that I didn't like. I started getting older and noticing graffiti. At that age, it was all like tied into things that were bad or like that you weren't supposed to do. I found some spray paint with my neighborhood friends, and the first thing I drew were boobs. Like real big, just 2 boobs, and then I ran. Taking the control of the message myself through graffiti was exhilarating, and that's where I developed a whole new taste for communication through that. I didn't know what I was gonna do for a living out of high school, and I was applying to the military, like the army, and somehow that didn't work out. And another friend at the same time was like, we're going to the Art Institute, you should check it out, I think this is the right fit for you. I was like, all right, might as well do that, because I was making mixtape covers or flyers for parties before this, and this is basically the same thing but for companies. I quickly was like, oh, I hate the structure of school, and I got out of there as soon as I could with an associate's and just started working. They came from one of my portfolio pieces. They were like, we want you to create a self-promoting piece. And somehow I'm like, I'll make t-shirts. The portfolio review came and everybody wanted to buy my shirts from me. And I'm like, man, this is cool. Maybe I should sell shirts. It was going really well. And then I got that cease and desist. I guess it was 2003. I was walking down the street with a friend, and these 2 girls stopped me. They were like, nice shirts, where'd you get that? And I'm like, oh, I made it. You know, I'm like all proud. And they looked at each other and they were like, oh, that's you? We do this swimwear line called Thick. And I'm like, oh, cool. And they're like, not cool. You need to stop doing what you're doing. And then like a week later, I get a cease and desist. After that cease and desist, I was having such a hard time coming up with a name. And then a friend of mine is like, yo, what about Free Gums? Why don't you bring that back up? In college, I did these house parties. I would make flyers for them, and I put them all under the name Free Gums. And then also, I kind of shed that graphic design approach, and then I just went more raw, like just drawings. That went really well, and I started getting into a bunch of stores. It was very lucrative, and it just opened my world to different experiences. Things had turned a corner for me, and things were going well. But that corner, once I turned it, I started realizing that I was so heavily into this retail part of the business that was not fun. I knew that I didn't want that. I just wanted to keep creating work, and started focusing more on projects that I could do with friends that allowed me to express myself more creatively. I started transitioning more into the work part and phasing out of the t-shirt brand or clothing line. Let me start removing those layers that I've been adding over the years. That's where I'm at now, expressing the essence of drawing. There's a thing about pre-columbian work that I'm very attracted to. When I'm exposed to really powerful work, it has a tendency to like show up through my hand. I go through different periods where I obsess over different things. For a while, when I first moved to LA, I was obsessed with the geography of LA. Coming from Miami, where it's just flat and there's no elevation. Whereas here, you got hills and there's like the terrain is more varied. So I was doing landscapes a lot, creating these worlds and thinking about how did it look like when the Native Americans were going through here, or whoever was living through here? How did they end up settling in these areas, and how did that landscape look? I was doing these drawings, these repetitive line work, and one of my studio mates in Miami, he was so fucking good with woodworking. His name is Richard Hayden, and he was always working on really interesting sculptures. And he was like, why don't you try like carving that drawing? And I tried it, and I was like, fuck, this is so time consuming. And then I ended up moving to LA, and then another friend was like, why don't you try using a router? And so I did it, and I was hooked. I'm like, oh wow, this is closer to drawing. It was very hard. You're fighting this machine basically to make it do what you want to do. So there's a level of energy that it takes to do that's like, I don't know if cathartic is the word. These works are portraying an idea through the line work. I got stuck in this one moment that was so beautiful and so awesome, and it helped carry that relationship for me. And then I held on to that so much I didn't realize that the relationship was deteriorating in other ways, and then the relationship ended. And I tie that to pressed flowers, where it's like you see this beautiful thing in nature and you preserve them in a way, but in the process you're killing the flower, and you'll never be able to fully capture that beauty. It'll lose its color, its brilliance. So I was doing these pressed flower series where it was about a reflection of my experience with holding on to those moments that were so dear to me that eventually ended up hurting me. I've always been curious about the nautical flags. The combination of shapes and lines and areas within the flag that are letters and signals, not knowing the language or what I'm looking at, but I know it says something. Looking at earlier dialects and scriptures and hieroglyphics, all those different types of communications that existed through the ages. And I decided, let me take a stab at creating an alphabet made of shapes and graphics that borrows from all of it, that works in a square format, can be placed in any direction, and each letter won't overlap with another. It was a really insightful and interesting journey into finding the alphabets and diving deeper into certain things. Like the Basque language is one of those languages that has its own origin that can't be traced back to others. My last name is Basque. I want to think that that's why I'm so interested in language and origins, and I wonder if there's like some sort of psyche or consciousness that's passed down. I want to believe it exists and that I've tapped into and just expressing what comes natural. There's a whole thing about not giving a fuck, like letting all the shit go. Oh, I have these emotions about my ex, like I need to deal with. Let me work those out and put them in some way physically that I could share with you. That's where I'm at. As long as it's a version of that, that's where I want to keep diving into. The journey of an artist. It's a journey that I am willing to share, the vulnerability of it. I don't know what I'm gonna be making a year from now. I want to be making art. What it looks like, I don't know. I don't even know if I'll be making art. The process of creation is so rewarding that it's hard to get away from, and I want to share it with everyone. It might not be received how I feel about it, but there's this thing that I was just like, yes, here.
And you can only view you with what you got. You don't have to pretend that you've got to know more. 'Cause you are your land and proud. Your land and proud. Your own land and proud. Your own land and proud. 'Cause you woke up feeling like this. You woke up knowing that you'll be you for the rest of your life. For the rest of your life. For the rest of your life.